Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The sun hung low in the sky over the crystal-clear waters of Monaco, its golden rays reflecting off the sleek, massive hull of the yacht that floated like a colossal titan against the gentle waves. The elite of the world gathered in their finest attire, the clinking of champagne glasses mingling with the soft hum of whispered conversations. It was the kind of event where every detail mattered, from the designer gowns to the imported wines, and where everyone had a place. But for one woman, her place on the $200 million yacht felt more like an accident. She stood at the edge of the deck, seemingly out of place among the polished, well-heeled guests who laughed and mingled, oblivious to her quiet presence. Her dark hair, swept back in an elegant updo, contrasted sharply with her simple navy dress, the fabric soft but not extravagant. She wore no jewelry, her only adornment the small smile she occasionally flashed when someone made eye contact. Yet no one returned her smile. No one could understand why she was here. It wasn't that she looked like a servant or a hired hand. She didn't. But she wasn't the kind of person who belonged at the heart of these gatherings either. The other guests didn't know her name, and she hadn't been introduced by anyone with any real authority. No one had extended their hand in friendship or offered her the polite nod of acknowledgement. Instead, she was an enigma, an unexpected guest on the Yacht of the Year. Her name was Clara. That was all anyone knew about her. No one at the party had ever heard of her, and frankly, no one cared to ask. The whispers were subtle at first, nothing more than a murmur behind their raised glasses. But they grew louder as the evening wore on. Who was she? How did she get here? Was she some billionaire's forgotten wife? A desperate socialite looking for an opportunity? In the back of the room, a small group of men stood, exchanging knowing glances. One of them, a tall man in a sharp black tuxedo, leaned in toward his companion. "Who is she?" he asked quietly, his eyes drifting over to Clara, who was now perched on the edge of the deck, staring out at the vast expanse of the sea. "She's nobody. Just some invitee, I think. Probably a friend of the host." The other man's voice held the dismissive tone of someone who had seen far too many nobodies trying to sneak into his world. "I don't like it. She doesn't fit in. It feels off." The tall man narrowed his eyes. "Look at her. She's got no place here." It was true. Clara didn't belong. But she wasn't concerned with fitting in or playing their games. In fact, the closer the evening drew toward its climax, the more it became apparent that Clara was anything but nervous or out of place. There was an aura of calm about her. A quiet confidence that no one could quite place. As the night went on, people began to notice the way she held herself. It wasn't just the fact that she didn't try to join in their conversations. It was the way she commanded a space without even saying a word. She didn't need to fit in, because, in that moment, she stood apart from the crowd, almost as though she were watching them from a distance. She stood alone. And in her solitude, she was a riddle that everyone in the room felt compelled to solve. At the bar, two women leaned in to exchange words. They, too, couldn't help but stare at Clara, their faces filled with curiosity. "Who does she think she is?" one whispered. "She looks like she doesn't even care about all this. I mean, look at her. She doesn't even have a real purse, let alone diamonds." "I've heard she's from one of those low-key rich families," the other woman offered, trying to sound more confident. "You know, the kind who don't flaunt their wealth." She spoke like she knew, but even as she said it, her voice quivered with uncertainty. She wasn't sure who Clara was, but the idea that Clara could be something more than she seemed made her nervous. Clara shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. Behind her, the low murmur of gossip swirled like a storm, barely audible over the sound of waves lapping against the ship. She could hear them talking. But she didn't care. She had been the subject of whispers before, and she had learned long ago that people loved to speak about what they didn't understand. As the night deepened, something in Clara changed. She straightened her shoulders, turning slowly, almost as if she had decided that the time for standing in the shadows had passed. She was done being the mystery. It was time to show them who she was. Without a word, she crossed the deck, making her way toward the captain's cabin. The crew members exchanged confused glances as she walked by them with quiet authority. They didn't stop her. They couldn't. Inside the captain's cabin, Clara stood for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the polished wood of the doorframe. She wasn't sure what she expected to find in here. But the one thing she was certain of was that the hour had come. She knocked once, and then she opened the door. "Captain," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I need to speak with you." The captain, an older man with silver hair, looked up in surprise. His eyes quickly scanned her, his brows furrowing in confusion. He hadn't expected this. She had no business here. "Yes?" he asked, though his voice carried a slight edge of hesitation. "I'm in charge of this yacht," she said simply. "And I need you to change the course immediately." The captain's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had no idea who this woman was, but he couldn't dismiss her. Not now. There was something in the way she spoke, something in the way she held herself. It was as though she had done this before. The commanding tone. The quiet but undeniable power in her presence. Change the course? The captain blinked, still processing the request. "Now," she said firmly. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you." For a long moment, there was silence between them. Then, the captain nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." Clara stepped aside as he moved past her, setting the course change into motion. As he left, she turned and glanced back at the crew members who had silently watched her enter. Her job here was done. The murmurs from the party outside had died down, and for a brief moment, the entire yacht seemed to pause. Everyone was wondering the same thing: who was this woman? And why had she just taken charge of a $200 million yacht with such ease? As Clara watched the crew work to follow her instructions, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The evening had just begun. And by the time it was over, no one would ever forget who she was. The yacht slowly cut through the cool waters of the Mediterranean as Clara stood at the stern, her fingers lightly gripping the polished railing. The sky above was a canvas of deepening purples and blues, the stars beginning to twinkle like diamonds scattered across the heavens. Despite the luxury surrounding her, Clara was calm. She had known moments like this before, moments when silence spoke louder than words, moments when everyone was watching, waiting for her to make her move. Behind her, the party continued, but something had shifted. The whispers that had once circled her like flies now seemed louder, more insistent. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, their curiosity tangible as they tried to piece together who she really was. In the center of the deck, a group of men had gathered around a table, their voices low, but filled with tension. One man, a thin, sharply dressed financier named Adrian, had taken it upon himself to find out more about Clara. He had heard rumors about her, vague stories from people who barely knew her, and now, more than ever, he needed answers. Adrian's gaze drifted over to Clara, who was now standing at the edge of the deck, her figure silhouetted against the backdrop of the darkening sky. She looked completely at ease, as though she belonged to the world around her. It was maddening, almost infuriating, because no one knew who she was. "She's not just some random invitee, is she?" Adrian asked, breaking the silence around the table. One of his companions, a well-known art dealer named Jack, shook his head, clearly still puzzled. "I don't think so. I've tried asking a few people about her, but no one seems to know anything. It's like she appeared out of nowhere." Another man, a successful real estate mogul named Derek, leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "I'm telling you, there's something off about her. The way she walks, the way she carries herself. It's almost as if she's in charge, even though no one has given her that authority. The conversation paused as they all watched Clara. She wasn't interacting with anyone. She wasn't seeking attention. And yet, she commanded the space around her effortlessly, her presence undeniable. "We need to find out who she is," Adrian said, his voice sharp with intent. "I have my sources. I'll dig into her background. She has to be someone important." Later that evening, the guests were starting to ease into their own private circles. Some stood near the bar, others by the windows, while a few gathered on the lower deck to take in the view. But Adrian wasn't interested in the view. His mind was only on Clara. He excused himself from the group and made his way toward the bar, his steps deliberate. As he approached the bartender, he leaned in casually, trying not to appear too eager. "I couldn't help but notice that woman," Adrian began, his voice smooth, casual. "Do you know who she is?" The bartender, a tall man with an easy smile, glanced over at Clara, who was now standing with her back to the party, seemingly lost in thought. "Her? She's a bit of a mystery. I've seen her around a few times. Never with anyone important. Just, mingling with people." Adrian's eyes narrowed. That wasn't enough. "But she's on this yacht, right?" The bartender paused, glancing around before lowering his voice. "Yeah, she's here as a guest. But not just any guest, She's been around before. Always seems to know exactly who to talk to. People like that don't just show up out of nowhere." Adrian's interest piqued. "What do you mean by that?" The bartender shrugged, a nonchalant expression masking something deeper. "I don't know much. All I know is that she's more than she lets on. I've overheard things, but no one really knows her. She's the kind of person who disappears in the background, but if you're paying attention, you see her everywhere." Adrian wasn't satisfied, but he had what he needed. He wasn't about to let this mystery woman slip through his fingers. There was something bigger at play here, and he was going to uncover it. As the night grew darker, Clara found herself moving away from the crowd. She had seen enough of their glances, their inquisitive eyes. It wasn't that she minded their curiosity, it was inevitable. But she wasn't here for them. She wasn't here for the shallow games or the empty words of the wealthy elite. She was here for something else. She made her way to the lower deck, where the wind was sharper and the lights were dimmer. As she walked, her heels clicking softly on the deck, she found herself thinking back to how she had arrived at this point in her life. Her journey had never been about fitting in. It had been about survival. And survival didn't come from pretending to be something she wasn't. It came from understanding the game, mastering it, and using it to her advantage. She had learned that lesson the hard way. When she reached the railing, she leaned against it, staring out at the endless ocean before her. The moonlight reflected off the water, its pale glow illuminating her face. She had built her empire in the shadows, never letting anyone see the full picture. But tonight, she would let them see just enough. Behind her, a shadow moved. Clara didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Adrian. He had been watching her from the moment she stepped aboard the yacht. He was relentless, like a wolf hunting its prey. She didn't mind. People like Adrian were easy to read. They thought they could uncover her secrets. They thought they could manipulate the situation to their advantage. But they didn't understand who they were dealing with. Adrian stepped up beside her, his presence imposing. "You're quite the mystery," he said, his tone casual but with an edge of challenge. "No one seems to know who you are, and frankly, it's driving people crazy. So, who are you really?" Clara turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting his. There was no fear in her eyes, only calm, steady confidence. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is what I've done. She could see the curiosity flicker in his eyes. Adrian was no fool. He could sense that she was more than she appeared. And what exactly have you done? She smiled slightly, the faintest trace of amusement touching her lips. I've built something. And tonight, you'll begin to understand just how much I own. Adrian's brows furrowed, his mind racing. Own? What are you talking about? Clara's smile widened ever so slightly, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. You think you're the only one with connections, Adrian? The only one with power in this room? She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. I don't just have power here. I own it. She turned away, her heels clicking once more as she walked toward the elevator. Adrian stood there, stunned, his mind racing to process what had just happened. She was different. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. And there was something in her words that chilled him to the bone. He needed to find out more. He couldn't let this go. Clara was hiding something, and Adrian was going to uncover it, no matter the cost. The morning fog had begun to lift as the yacht made its way to a secluded bay, far removed from the glittering lights of Monaco and the crowds that surrounded it. Clara stood on the upper deck, gazing out at the sprawling expanse of the sea, the vast emptiness that stretched before her. It had been her escape for so long, an unyielding reminder of the freedom she had fought so hard to claim. Her thoughts drifted to the conversation she'd had with Adrian the night before. He was no fool. Despite his confident front, Clara could sense the disquiet in him, the sense that there was more to her story than met the eye. And in a way, that was exactly what she wanted. She didn't need to hide anymore, not now. But it wasn't just about showing the world her empire. It was about revealing her truth, the real story behind everything she had built, the price she had paid for the power she now commanded. The crew was quietly preparing for the day ahead, the soft hum of machinery blending with the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. As Clara made her way down to the lower deck, she felt a cold chill run through her. It wasn't the weather, it was something else, something far more personal. It was the feeling that someone was watching her every move, trying to piece together the enigma that was Clara. The party last night had been a spectacle, a symbol of everything she had worked for. But now, in the quiet of the morning, Clara couldn't shake the sense that the cracks in her perfect facade were beginning to show. Adrian had been persistent, and she knew it wouldn't be long before he uncovered the truth. But what would he do with it once he found it? Would he be an ally, or would he try to expose her to the world? As she descended the steps toward the lower deck, Clara's mind raced back to the beginning, the days when everything had seemed so far out of reach, when survival had been a struggle and the world had felt like an enemy. Flashback, the beginning. Clara had never been a stranger to hardship. Born into a modest family in a small town on the outskirts of Paris, she had learned from an early age that nothing in life was ever handed to you. Her parents, hardworking but barely scraping by, had always instilled in her the importance of determination. They taught her that the world wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was simply indifferent, and if you wanted something, you had to take it. She had never known luxury, never even imagined it. But Clara had always had something that many others didn't, an unrelenting drive to make a difference. She was never content with the status quo, never satisfied with just existing. She wanted more. And not just for herself. She wanted to prove to the world that it was possible to rise from nothing, to carve a place for herself in a world that had forgotten the small and the meek. Her first taste of true power had come when she was just 18. That was when she had met Victor, the man who would change everything for her. Victor was older, a self-made millionaire with ties to some of the most powerful people in the world. He had seen something in Clara, something raw, something ambitious. And he had taken her under his wing. At first, it had all seemed like a dream. Victor had promised her the world. He introduced her to his network of connections, his world of opulence and high-stakes business. But the more Clara learned about Victor's world, the more she began to understand the price of ambition. It wasn't long before she realized that Victor wasn't just a businessman, he was a manipulator, a puppeteer who controlled everything from behind the scenes. And in his world, there was no room for kindness or second chances. It was a world of deals made in shadows, of secrets kept buried deep beneath layers of deceit. But Clara had been driven, and she had learned quickly. She learned how to play the game, how to navigate the treacherous waters of power and manipulation. She rose through the ranks, earning Victor's trust. But deep down, she knew that she could never fully trust him. He was too much of a risk, too unpredictable. One day, Victor made a mistake that would ultimately cost him everything. He underestimated Clara. He thought she was just another naive girl, someone to be used and discarded when the time came. But Clara had other plans. In a bold move, she had orchestrated Victor's downfall. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been without consequences. But Clara had come out on top. She had seized control of his empire, using his wealth and connections to build her own. She had become a silent force in the world of high-stakes business, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Present day, the empire. As the yacht sailed closer to the secluded bay, Clara's thoughts returned to the present. She had come a long way from the girl who had once been nothing. Now, she was someone people whispered about, someone whose name carried weight. But it wasn't just about the money, the yachts, or the luxury. It was about power. It was about proving that anyone could rise, no matter their starting point. But as much as she had achieved, there was still one thing she had yet to fully confront, the truth of her past. There were people who knew what she had done, people who were still looking for her, still trying to pull her back into the shadows. And one of those people was Adrian. Adrian had been persistent, like a dog with a bone. He had already started digging into her past, and he was getting closer to the truth. Clara knew it was only a matter of time before he uncovered her connection to Victor, and when that happened, there would be no going back. He would expose everything, and the world would know what she had done. But Clara wasn't worried. She had built her empire on the foundation of secrecy, and no one, not even Adrian, could take that away from her. The truth would come out, but it would come on her terms. She glanced over at the man standing near the edge of the deck. He was watching her with a look of quiet determination. He was one of her most trusted allies, a man who had been with her from the very beginning. His name was Elias, and he knew everything about her past. He had been the one who had helped her navigate Victor's empire, the one who had kept her grounded when things seemed impossible. Clara walked over to him, her steps slow and deliberate. She didn't need to ask what was on his mind, she could see it in his eyes. "We need to talk," Elias said, his voice low but urgent. "Adrian is getting too close." Clara nodded. She had been expecting this conversation. "I know. But it's too late to stop him now. Let him dig. Let him think he's uncovering the truth." Elias hesitated, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But what if he exposes everything? What if he reveals your connection to Victor?" Clara's expression remained calm, but there was a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. "If he does, then it's his mistake. Let him think he can control the narrative. When the time comes, I'll show him who's really in control." Elias didn't say anything more. He knew Clara's resolve better than anyone. When she made up her mind, there was no stopping her. She had fought too hard to get to where she was, and she would not let anyone, especially Adrian, take that away from her. As the yacht docked in the secluded bay, Clara felt a strange sense of anticipation wash over her. This was where it would all come to a head. Adrian would soon learn the truth, but it wouldn't be the truth he expected. And when he did, the world would never be the same again. The man from her past, the one who knew her secrets, had arrived. And with him, came the final piece of the puzzle. Clara was ready to face whatever came next. Because, in the end, she knew one thing for sure, the game was only just beginning. The yacht had docked in the secluded bay as planned, its grandiose silhouette cutting a stark contrast against the rocky coastline. Clara stood at the bow, her arms folded across her chest, gazing out at the horizon. The first light of dawn had begun to break over the water, bathing the scene in a pale, ethereal glow. It was a quiet, almost serene moment, but Clara felt anything but calm. The night had been a blur, intense, full of whispered secrets, looming threats, and unsaid words. The encounter with Adrian had been inevitable. He had pushed too hard, tried too many angles, and now the confrontation she had been avoiding was upon her. Clara knew that once Adrian had everything figured out, nothing would be the same. But she wasn't worried, at least, not in the way people might expect. The truth was, she had already prepared for this moment. And it was time to take control. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of the crew preparing the yacht for its next journey. The men and women were quick and efficient, all focused on their tasks. They didn't look at her the way the guests had last night, curious, uncertain, some with a touch of disdain. These were the people who had been with her from the beginning, the ones who knew who she was and had learned to respect her for it. They didn't question her. They knew her power. They knew what she had built. Elias, ever vigilant, had joined her on the deck. His presence was reassuring, as it always had been. He had been there when she had risen to the top, and he had stayed by her side when others had tried to tear her down. Clara didn't need to say a word to him. He understood her every thought, every flicker of emotion. "You're ready for this, aren't you?" Elias asked, his voice low, as he leaned against the railing beside her. Clara turned to him, her face expressionless, but there was something in her eyes that spoke volumes. "I've been ready for a long time." Flashback, the price of ambition. It hadn't always been like this life of luxury, power, and control. In fact, Clara had once been terrified by the idea of living in such a world. When she had first entered Victor's life, she had been a girl with no real direction, a woman with a burning ambition but no means to achieve it. Victor had been the bridge between her old life and her new one, a dangerous bridge that had led her to a world of excess and corruption. Clara's relationship with Victor had always been transactional, never personal. He had never cared for her. Not in the way a lover might. He saw her as a tool, a means to an end. But in her vulnerability, she had found a way to use him as well. She had learned from him, watching every move he made, every decision, every interaction. She had learned how to manipulate people, how to create opportunities, how to build her own empire. At first, Victor had trusted her. But as Clara had gained influence, as she had begun to shape his empire with her own hands, Victor had become wary. She had known he would eventually try to take it all back, that was just the nature of people like him. So, when the time came, Clara had made her move. She had played the game with him, using his own tactics against him. And she had won. But victory had come at a price. Victor had been ruthless, his enemies numerous. He was a man who left no room for weakness. And when Clara had defeated him, she knew that there would always be a target on her back. People didn't just forget those who toppled giants, they remembered them, and they hunted them. In the years that followed, Clara had made her empire even stronger. She had hidden herself in the shadows, building an intricate web of influence, alliances, and secrets. She had built the fleet of yachts, each more luxurious than the last, using the wealth and contacts she had acquired from Victor's empire. But no matter how much power she amassed, the threat of exposure had always loomed. And now, it was becoming a reality. Adrian, the relentless businessman, was getting closer to unraveling the threads of her carefully constructed world. She couldn't let him discover everything, especially not about Victor and the dark past that bound them together. Present day, confrontation. As the yacht lay anchored in the bay, the sun now fully risen, Clara walked with purpose to the lower deck where the crew had gathered. There were two people she needed to meet: Elias, her most trusted confidant, and a man who had recently arrived from her past, someone who had always known what she had done to Victor, someone who could expose the full truth if he so wished. He was standing at the far side of the deck, speaking with one of the crew members. His face was shadowed beneath a dark cap, but Clara knew him the moment she saw him. It was Michael, the man who had helped her execute Victor's downfall, the man who had been a silent partner in the shadows for all these years. Clara's steps quickened as she approached him. The moment he saw her, Michael turned, his expression unreadable. He had always been a man of few words, but Clara could sense the tension in the air. There was something different about him today, something she couldn't quite place. "You're here," Clara said, her voice steady, betraying no hint of the storm that was brewing inside her. "I wasn't sure if you would come." Michael shrugged, his eyes flicking over her face. "I didn't have much choice. You know that." Clara nodded, but she didn't push further. She had always trusted Michael, but even trust could have its limits. He had been her partner in this empire, but he had also seen everything she had done. Everything she had sacrificed. And Michael wasn't a fool. He knew the price of ambition. "I assume you're aware of the situation," Clara said, her gaze hardening. "Adrian is getting closer. He's starting to ask the right questions. And the truth about Victor is going to come out." Michael's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His silence spoke volumes, but Clara wasn't sure whether he was hesitant or simply waiting for her to make the first move. "What do you want me to do about it?" Michael asked, his voice quiet, almost detached. Clara's lips curled into a thin smile. "I need you to stay out of it. Let Adrian dig. Let him think he's uncovering the truth. I'll handle the rest." For a long moment, Michael didn't respond. He simply stared at her, his gaze penetrating, as though he were searching for something deeper. "You really think you can control this? Control everything?" Clara's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, the facade she had so carefully built seemed to crack. "I have to. I don't have any other choice. The empire, the fleet, everything I've built, it's all at risk. And I will not let anyone destroy it." Michael took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "Not even Adrian?" Clara's eyes burned with quiet intensity. "Especially not Adrian." The growing web. Back in the main cabin, Adrian had been busy with his own investigation. He had spent the morning speaking with the crew, digging deeper into Clara's past, trying to find any lead that could connect her to the mysterious empire she had built. What he hadn't counted on was Clara's response. She was playing the game, yes, but she was doing so with a level of control he hadn't anticipated. Adrian sat at a desk, reviewing documents that had been provided to him by his sources. His eyes scanned through the papers, pausing occasionally on certain names. Names that had come up in relation to Victor's business dealings. He was certain that Clara's connection to Victor wasn't just a rumor. There was something deeper, something darker, behind their relationship. But what? As the minutes ticked by, Adrian's frustration grew. He couldn't piece it together. He couldn't crack the code. But Clara had been too calm. She knew exactly how to handle him. And that unnerved him more than anything else. The yacht rocked gently in the bay, its sleek, towering figure now seeming small against the looming cliffs that surrounded it. The tranquil silence of the morning was abruptly interrupted by the frantic footsteps of the crew as they rushed to secure the vessel. Clara stood at the stern, her back to the chaos unfolding on the deck. Her thoughts were focused, her mind calculating the next steps with precision. She had prepared for this moment, but even preparation couldn't ease the sense of impending danger that washed over her. "Victor's men," the crew member had said, his words still ringing in her ears. It had been years since she'd last encountered anyone from Victor's past, and yet, in a twisted turn of fate, they had found her. She had expected Adrian to be her primary adversary in this game, but now it seemed her past had come back to haunt her in the most dangerous way possible. Her gaze hardened, and her resolve strengthened. Victor's men were no ordinary mercenaries. They were the remnants of a network that had once controlled half of the world's dark underworld dealings. When Clara had taken Victor's empire, she hadn't just claimed his wealth, she had dismantled a dangerous organization, an organization that had been built on fear, manipulation, and secrecy. And now, Victor's former associates were here, threatening to unravel everything she had built. Clara had always known that there would be consequences for her actions. But she had also known that she couldn't run from her past. No matter how far she'd gone, it would always be chasing her. She had built a life in the shadows, but the light was now shining brightly on her. And she would either face it head-on or risk losing everything she had fought for. Elias stepped beside her, his expression unreadable. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice low, careful. Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the control room of the yacht, her movements purposeful. The crew had already begun securing the vessel, but it wouldn't matter if they didn't know how to handle what was coming. Victor's men were trained, ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. "Prepare for the worst," Clara said, her voice cold. "And make sure we're ready for a fight." Elias nodded and moved away, leaving Clara alone in the control room. The screens displayed a map of their current position, the coastline a few miles away. It was clear they couldn't stay here. The yacht was too exposed. The bay was isolated, but it wasn't secure. The moment Victor's men landed, they would have the perfect vantage point to strike. As Clara stared at the map, her thoughts raced. She needed a plan, a strategy to protect herself, her crew, and her empire. She had never underestimated Victor, but she had always been one step ahead. She would be again. It wasn't about survival, it was about sending a message. If she let Victor's men get away with this, if she showed weakness, everything she had built would come crashing down. She activated the yacht's internal communication system and spoke to the crew over the intercom. "We are not backing down. Prepare the yacht to depart immediately. We will leave this bay. And when we do, we won't stop." Flashback, the heart of the empire. Clara's rise to power had been a slow burn, a careful game of manipulation and patience. It hadn't been glamorous or quick. It had been calculated. And it had started with Victor's biggest weakness, his arrogance. When Clara had first entered Victor's world, she had been an outsider, a young woman with little more than ambition to fuel her. Victor had been a man of great wealth, but his empire wasn't built on a solid foundation. It was built on lies, manipulation, and a web of broken promises. She had seen through it all. And when she had been invited into his inner circle, she had taken the opportunity to learn everything she could. For months, she watched Victor as he built his empire. She watched him control every decision, every deal, every betrayal. She had been nothing more than an observer at first, but soon, Clara had realized that the real power wasn't in the wealth. It was in the information. Victor's empire was nothing without the people who worked for him, without the network of loyal allies who kept his secrets. And Clara had learned how to use that network against him. She had started small. Gathering intel, building alliances, and planting seeds of doubt within Victor's closest advisors. It hadn't taken long for Clara to find the cracks in Victor's armor. He trusted no one, and yet, he had made one fatal mistake: he had trusted her. The day she had moved against him had been a calculated risk. She had arranged for Victor to meet with one of his most dangerous enemies, a rival businessman who had long desired Victor's downfall. Clara had ensured that the meeting would be timed perfectly, with Victor believing that he was in control, unaware that Clara had already secured the upper hand. It was a brilliant move, but it had come at a cost. Victor had been furious, his empire on the brink of collapse. But he had underestimated Clara. In the end, it had been her that stood victorious. She had taken Victor's wealth, his contacts, and his ships. And just like that, the empire that had once been his was now hers. Present day, the rising threat. Back on the yacht, Clara's mind snapped back to the present. The crew had finished preparing, and the yacht was already pulling away from the bay. But Clara knew that the danger wasn't over. Victor's men wouldn't let them escape so easily. The yacht's engines roared to life as the vessel picked up speed, leaving the coastline behind. But Clara knew the real battle was just beginning. Victor's men had likely already dispatched a small team to track them. And once they had found their target, there would be no turning back. "We need to move fast," Elias said, his voice urgent. "The moment we hit open water, they'll know exactly where we are. We can't outrun them forever." Clara's gaze sharpened. "We won't outrun them. But we will make them think we will." The plan. Clara had always been one step ahead, and now it was time to play the game. She walked to the control panel and began to input coordinates. The yacht's speed increased, the ship cutting through the water with newfound urgency. "Get the crew to the lower deck," Clara instructed. "We need to prepare for anything." Elias moved quickly to relay the order, and within moments, the crew had scattered, heading for their stations. Clara stood alone at the control panel, her mind focused. She wasn't just running from Victor's men. She was preparing for an ambush of her own. She had no intention of letting Victor's associates believe they could just waltz onto her yacht and take her down. She would fight back. She would show them what it meant to underestimate her. As the yacht sailed further into open water, Clara checked the radar, ensuring they were still undetected. But it wouldn't be long before Victor's men found them. The question wasn't if they would find her, it was when. And when they did, Clara was ready. The crew continued to prepare, setting up barricades, making sure the yacht systems were ready for a potential defense. But Clara knew that the real weapon they had was her mind. She had already come up with a plan, an intricate series of moves designed to throw Victor's men off their game. She reached for the communication system again and patched herself through to the entire crew. "When they come," she said, her voice calm and controlled, "we'll make them wish they'd never crossed me." The confrontation. It didn't take long for Clara to hear the unmistakable sound of an approaching vessel. She had expected it, and yet, as the radar pinged with their location, Clara couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline. The time had come. She turned to Elias, who stood beside her, waiting for the signal. "Get ready," Clara said quietly. "It's time to show them who's really in charge." The yacht began to turn, its sharp, precise movement sending a clear message to Victor's men: they weren't the only ones who knew how to navigate these waters. As the other vessel closed in, Clara's crew took their positions, ready for the confrontation. The yacht had been transformed into a fortress, its sleek lines hiding the deadly precision of its defenses. But just as Clara was about to give the order, something unexpected happened. The other vessel, now only a few hundred meters away, began to slow down. Clara's eyes narrowed in confusion. They weren't coming to attack, they were coming to negotiate. The realization hit her like a freight train. Victor's men weren't here to destroy her. They were here to make her an offer. And it was an offer she had never expected. The air had grown thick with tension as Clara stood at the helm of the yacht, watching the vessel that had approached her with deliberate slowness. The man who stepped forward from Victor's crew wasn't just anyone. His face was hidden by a mask, but his eyes, his cold, calculating eyes, were unmistakable. Clara knew this man. She had seen him before, many years ago. He had been one of Victor's most trusted allies, someone she had thought was long gone, buried under the weight of their past. And yet here he was, standing before her, just a few hundred meters away. His presence was a chilling reminder that no one, not even someone like her, could escape the past. "You thought you could just walk away from all of this?" The masked man called across the water, his voice low and unwavering. "You thought you could destroy Victor's empire and get away with it?" Clara's eyes narrowed. She had expected trouble, but not like this. "I didn't destroy it," she said, her voice steady, her expression impassive. "I took it. And what's left of Victor's empire is nothing but a broken shell." The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he motioned for his men to lower the boat they had used to approach. Clara stood still, her gaze fixed on him as the boat neared. Every second felt like an eternity, but she didn't flinch. She had faced worse than this. She had faced betrayal, manipulation, and even death. This man, whoever he was, would not be her downfall. When the boat finally reached the side of the yacht, the masked man stepped onto the deck with a measured step. His posture was confident, his demeanor cold. Clara could sense the power he had once commanded, and she knew exactly what he was here for. "You're not here to destroy me," Clara said, her voice rising with the challenge. "You're here to make me an offer." The man's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You've always been smart, Clara. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not here to make you an offer." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. "I'm here to finish what Victor started." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had expected many things, but not this. The man had come to finish her off. This was no negotiation. It was a declaration of war. "You think you can take me down?" Clara asked, her voice sharp. "You think you can simply walk onto my yacht and have me bow to you?" The masked man stepped closer, his boots heavy against the deck. "I don't need to take you down, Clara. The truth will do that for me." He motioned to the crew behind him. "We've been tracking you for years. We know every move you've made since you took Victor's empire. And now, it's time for the world to know exactly who you are. Exactly what you did to get to where you are." Clara stood frozen. Her mind raced as the masked man's words sank in. The truth. She had always known this moment would come, but she had never imagined it would come like this. This wasn't just about Victor's empire. It was about everything she had built, and everything she had hidden. The people she had deceived, the deals she had made, and the lies she had told. The past had come rushing back, and Clara realized that she could no longer run from it. The truth was about to be revealed, whether she wanted it or not. Flashback, the final betrayal. Clara had always known that Victor was dangerous. His empire had been built on blood and broken promises, and he had never hesitated to use people to further his goals. When she had first entered his world, she had been nothing more than an ambitious young woman trying to find her way. But she had quickly learned that in Victor's world, there was no room for weakness. And Clara had never been weak. At first, she had played the game. She had worked her way into Victor's inner circle, using her charm, her intelligence, and her ambition to win his favor. But all the while, she had been planning her escape. She knew that Victor would never let her go. She knew that, one day, he would turn on her and discard her as he had done with so many others. So, Clara had bided her time, learning Victor's weaknesses, gathering information, and forming alliances. She had done everything she could to build her own network of power. And when the moment had come, when she had seen Victor's vulnerability, she had made her move. It had been a move that would change everything. Clara had orchestrated Victor's downfall, setting him up with one of his most dangerous rivals. She had planted the seeds of distrust, knowing that Victor would never see it coming. In the end, Victor had fallen. And Clara had seized control of his empire, his wealth, his contacts, his ships. All of it had become hers. But there had been a price. Victor's men had been angry. They had been betrayed. And as much as Clara had tried to move on, she knew that Victor's associates would never let her forget what she had done. They had been waiting. Watching. And now, they had come to collect. Present day, the confrontation. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself as the masked man's words echoed in her mind. He wasn't here to negotiate. He wasn't here to talk. He had come for one reason, to destroy her. But Clara wasn't going to let that happen. She had spent years building her empire, and she would not let anyone take it from her, not Victor, not his men. And certainly not the shadows of her past. You think you can just destroy me with your threats? Clara asked, her voice cold with defiance. I've fought too hard to get here. And I will fight to keep everything I've built. The masked man's smile faded as he took another step forward. You don't get it, Clara. It's not about what you've built. It's about what you've hidden. The world doesn't know the truth about you. But we do. And we're going to make sure they find out. Clara didn't flinch. If you think you can scare me into submission, you're wrong. I've faced worse than you. The man's eyes hardened. This is bigger than you. Bigger than me. This is about legacy. It's about power. And right now, you're standing in the way of everything Victor worked for. Clara's lips curled into a thin smile. Victor's legacy is dead. His empire is mine now. And if you want to fight me for it, you're welcome to try. The man reached for the device hidden beneath his jacket. Clara's eyes flicked to it instantly, recognizing it as a remote, likely wired to some kind of explosive. He was trying to intimidate her, to make her back down. But Clara was done backing down. She had built this empire from nothing, and she would be damned if she let anyone take it from her. Just as the man raised the device, Clara moved with lightning speed, grabbing the nearby metal rod and swinging it toward him. The blow landed squarely on his arm, knocking the remote from his grip. The man staggered back, eyes wide in shock. You made a mistake, Clara said, her voice filled with icy determination. You thought you could use me. You thought you could take everything I've worked for. But you're wrong. The crew rushed forward, securing the masked man and his associates, disarming them and taking control of the situation. Clara stood tall, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. She had won this battle. But the war was far from over. The revelation. As the masked man was escorted off the yacht, Clara felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was the final test. The past, the secrets, the lies, it had all come to this. You didn't just take Victor's empire, did you? Elias asked, his voice low, filled with curiosity. You took everything. His network, his contacts, even his darkest secrets. Clara nodded. I didn't just build an empire. I took control of everything Victor had. The world doesn't know what I've done to get here, and I intend to keep it that way. Elias looked at her, his expression filled with respect. So, what now? Clara turned to face him, her eyes sharp with purpose. Now, we continue. We show the world that we're not just survivors. We're conquerors. Clara had fought for everything she had. She had built an empire from the ground up, taking control of Victor's shattered legacy and turning it into something far more powerful. But as she stood on the deck of the yacht, overlooking the vast ocean, she knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be enemies, always be threats. But Clara was ready. She had learned that true power wasn't just about wealth or influence, it was about resilience. It was about rising above the storms, even when everything seemed to be crashing down. As the yacht sailed toward the horizon, Clara knew that this was only the beginning. The truth had been revealed, and the world would never be the same. Wait for next part. Thank you.